In early spring, when the last sheets of frost retreat from the soil and sunlight begins to filter through bare branches with renewed strength, certain tree trunks reveal a phenomenon that seems almost staged for attention. At first, the viewer might mistake it for fallen petals from a distant blooming shrub or flecks of paint catching the morning light. Yet, as the camera drifts closer, these crimson flecks begin to shift. The red intensifies, the shapes sharpen, and the forest floor reveals one of its most familiar yet strangely overlooked gatherings. Immense clusters of firebugs pressed along the bases of trees, scattered across warm stones, and spilling over sunlit patches of old walls like a living red carpet unrolled by the season itself. Their bodies are small, hardly longer than a fingernail, yet when they assemble by the hundreds or even thousands, the sheer density of motion draws the eye in a way no solitary insect ever could. The firebug thrives by embracing the power of the crowd. Unlike many insects that disperse to avoid predators or competition, these bugs openly gather at the feet of mature linden and maple trees, where seeds rich in fats and carbohydrates accumulate. The ground beneath such trees is never truly quiet. Even when the wind is absent, the surface seems to ripple with tiny movements. Firebugs move with an unhurried confidence, stepping past one another in continuous interlocking routes that seem chaotic at a glance, yet reveal a loose social structure when observed from above. They are attracted not only to fallen seeds, but also to tree sap bleeding from bark cracks, where sweet, nutrient-rich films bead in the sunlight. When one firebug discovers such a resource, others quickly converge, guided by simple chemical cues and the unspoken logic of communal survival. The effect is striking. Many insects rely on concealment or camouflage to survive. Firebugs do the opposite. Their bright red and black patterns stand out sharply against nearly every natural background. This coloration is a form of aposematism, an evolutionary strategy in which visibility becomes a warning rather than a vulnerability. The pigments advertise that the insect is not worth eating. Firebugs feed primarily on seeds from the linden family, and those seeds contain defensive compounds that the insects sequester in their bodies. As predators learn through bitter experience, firebugs taste unpleasant, and the red markings serve as a reminder not to repeat the mistake. The strategy becomes exponentially more effective when hundreds gather together. A single firebug may be overlooked or tested by a bird once. A cluster of 1,000 transforms into an unmistakable billboard announcing the same message. From a distance, these clusters behave almost like urban street crowds, shifting with sunlight patterns, adjusting positions as if responding to invisible traffic flows. When the morning sun warms a particular stretch of bark, the firebugs spread across it in dense layers, maximizing heat absorption. Their small size makes thermoregulation critical. Early in the year, before temperatures rise consistently, the bugs must gather on heat-absorbing surfaces to raise their body temperature enough to move, feed, and mate. The black patches on their backs act as thermal collectors, absorbing solar radiation and distributing warmth throughout their bodies. The red, contrary to assumption, may have evolved partially for thermoregulation as well, allowing heat to disperse without compromising the visual impact of their warning colors. As the camera shifts closer, the viewer sees that these gatherings are not uniform. Some firebugs cluster so densely that the ground beneath them disappears entirely, forming thick, shifting layers that spill over each other like slow-moving lava. Others circle the edges of the group, probing surfaces, testing seeds, and occasionally lifting their bodies as if sampling the air for chemical signals. Each bug is simple in its motivations, yet the collective behavior takes on a complexity that no individual demonstrates alone. When one section of the group migrates toward a new source of warmth or food, the motion pulls others with it, creating waves of red that glide across the tree's base with surprising cohesion. Predators, especially birds and small mammals, often adopt a cautious stance around these gatherings. Experience teaches them that the bold patterns and massed formations are not an invitation but a deterrent. A bird may land nearby, head tilting, body poised to investigate. Yet after a brief attempt or a past unpleasant meal, it abandons the opportunity. Firebugs are not equipped with powerful chemical defenses compared to some other insects. They do not burn, sting, or exude poisons capable of damaging tissue. Their protection relies on taste and predictability. The red color is enough to bridge memory across seasons. In ecosystems where learning determines survival, the firebug's open honesty, a visual announcement of its unpalatability, becomes a safer strategy than the secrecy many insects prefer. Within the cluster, mating is a constant presence throughout spring and summer. Paired firebugs often remain connected for extended periods, sometimes for hours, as they move together across the bark. This behavior is not simply reproductive efficiency, it also reduces the risk of interruptions from rivals or predators. A connected pair functions as a single unit navigating the crowd, exchanging chemical cues that synchronize reproductive timing. The sheer density of the group ensures that opportunities for pairing are abundant, and the shared warmth accelerates development, allowing young nymphs to emerge during periods when seeds are most plentiful. The ecology of these gatherings extends beyond the firebugs themselves. They're feeding leaves behind pierced seeds and broken husks, accelerating decomposition and providing microhabitats for fungi and small invertebrates. Their presence may also influence seed dispersal. By consuming certain portions of seeds and leaving others intact, they subtly shift the germination success of the trees they depend upon. Firebugs do not act as highly targeted ecological engineers, but their mass behavior gently shapes the conditions of the micro-ecosystems at the bases of the trees they frequent. As summer advances, the gatherings shift in rhythm, though not in scale. Cooler mornings prompt renewed clustering on warm rocks and sunlit trunks. Hot afternoons scatter them into shaded leaf litter. Even in dispersal, the groups never fully disband. Firebugs maintain a loose communal pattern that persists throughout their life cycle, a strategy that ensures protection, efficient feeding, and access to mates. Their world is not one of solitary heroics or violent clashes. It is a low-level, slow-moving society ruled by simple instincts that collectively form a surprisingly stable system. In a forest filled with predators and harsh environmental cycles, their success lies in numbers, in color, and in an evolutionary honesty that few animals display so openly. For viewers familiar with urban landscapes, the firebug's behavior mirrors human patterns more closely than expected. They gather in squares of warm stone, congregate near reliable food sources, and shift en masse when environmental conditions change. The red mobs on the tree trunks may seem chaotic, but their survival is proof of an ancient and quietly efficient strategy. They thrive not by hiding, but by declaring themselves boldly and collectively, turning the forest floor into a mosaic of living warning signs. Under the hard sunlight of late summer, when cotton fields begin to shift from deep green to the pale, dusty hues of harvest season, a subtle flicker of movement marks the arrival of one of agriculture's most persistent raiding forces. At first glance, the disturbance seems unremarkable. A slight agitation on the outer capsules of maturing cotton bolls, a reddened shimmer almost identical to the plant's own stressed pigments. But as the camera sinks closer into the rows, it becomes clear that the movement is not the result of wind or the tremor of a passing machine. Instead, clusters of red cotton bugs, their bodies bright and unmistakable against the pale fiber and cracked soil, move in deliberate formation across the field. Their approach is slow, but not hesitant. It resembles the advance of a small, methodical army sweeping across a landscape that cannot move fast enough to escape them. The red cotton bug, a member of the family Pyracoridae, is built for one purpose: extracting nourishment from seeds with the highest efficiency possible. Unlike chewing insects that tear leaves or stems, these bugs operate with a level of precision comparable to surgical extraction. Their mouthparts have evolved into needle-like stylets, capable of piercing through the tough outer walls of cotton bolls and reaching the nutrient-rich tissues within. Each insertion is measured, the stylets sliding into the soft inner seed with barely visible effort. Once inside, the bug deploys digestive enzymes that liquefy the tissues, allowing it to draw out the contents like a siphon. What remains behind is not a visibly shredded seed, but a hollowed structure whose value has been silently removed. Seen up close, the behavior appears almost industrial. Newly arrived bugs press themselves tightly along the seams of cotton pods, selecting the thinnest points where fiber meets shell. Their bright red coloration stands out vividly, and while it may seem like a reckless trait in the open landscape of a farm, it too carries evolutionary significance. Much like their firebug relatives, red cotton bugs rely on aposematic coloring, a visual warning to birds and predatory insects that their bodies carry unpleasant chemicals derived from the very seeds they consume. The more visible they are, the fewer predators attempt to test their defenses. And in an agricultural field where resources are dense and movement is relatively unhindered, the survival advantage of simply being distasteful adds up quickly. The invasion front rarely moves as a single tight mass, yet there is a coordinated rhythm to their spread that makes it feel as though the group operates with shared intent. Individual bugs explore the edges of each plant, probing fibers and crevices, and when they find a weakened bole or a maturing seed cluster, chemical signals on their bodies attract others to the site. Their movements draw more than their share of attention because they often gather in conspicuous numbers, lining the pods in rows that resemble troops scaling a fortification. By the time a farmer notices the infestation, significant damage may already be underway. The seeds, though still externally intact, lose their viability, quality, and economic value. In regions where cotton forms a critical part of local livelihoods, the arrival of these red raiders is never taken lightly. The ecological dynamics between red cotton bugs and agricultural landscapes illustrate a deeper pattern. In natural ecosystems, seed-feeding insects are regulated by predators, climatic fluctuations, and the dispersed nature of their food sources. But on farms, where vast stretches of identical plants stand in uniform formation, the insects encounter a feast arranged in neat, predictable rows. Evolution has not prepared cotton to defend itself against specialized sap feeders on this artificial scale. The result is an imbalance that farmers work relentlessly to correct. Yet even in this human-engineered battleground, the bugs are not without enemies. Ladybird beetles, spiders, assassin bugs, and various species of parasitic flies all play roles in limiting red cotton bug populations. Parasitic flies, in particular, offer one of the more fascinating natural checks. The female fly will deposit her egg on the body of a red cotton bug, and upon hatching, the larva burrows inward, feeding from within until the host eventually collapses. This gruesome form of biological control exists quietly in the margins of the field and rarely eliminates the bug outright, but it slows the expansion enough to influence the dynamics of each season. Birds, too, attempt to feed on them despite their warning colors, especially when other food sources decline. A young bird may capture a red cotton bug once before learning the lesson its parents already know, that this particular insect offers more regret than nourishment. Farmers face an ongoing battle with these invaders, and while chemical treatments remain common, they come with predictable costs to beneficial insects and soil ecology. Integrated pest management, a strategy that blends biological control, crop rotation, and selective intervention, has become increasingly important. By encouraging natural predators, removing old plant debris where bugs overwinter, and timing harvests to reduce exposure, farmers can shift the balance without relying solely on pesticides. Yet the bugs remain persistent. Their resilience is tied not to speed or aggression, but to the slow, steady effectiveness of their feeding strategy. Once a field becomes favorable, they spread from plant to plant like a creeping crimson tide. From a sensory perspective, the invasion is quiet. There is no audible chewing, no flutter of wings, no sudden rush of movement. The bugs simply appear, settling onto the pods with a patience that feels almost tactical. The sunlight reflects off their red bodies, making them easy to spot even from a distance, but the danger lies in the subtlety of their damage. A cotton boll may look healthy until it is opened, only revealing the ghost-like remains of its seeds long after the bugs have moved on. The true cost unfolds weeks later, when fiber quality diminishes, seed weight drops, and entire segments of yield fall below market value. This quiet assault has shaped the evolutionary trajectory of the bugs themselves. Their mouthparts, honed over countless generations, allow them to bypass plant defenses that would stop other insects. Their digestive enzymes are specialized to break down the tough proteins and lipids within seeds. Their coloration communicates a clear message to predators, reducing mortality even in open fields. And their ability to gather in loose but effective formations ensures that no resource-rich area remains untouched. These traits have not evolved in response to agriculture specifically, but the agricultural environment amplifies their effectiveness, creating a scenario where a naturally moderate pest becomes a genuine threat. As the camera pans across a field at dusk, the red cotton bugs continue their advance, their bodies glowing faintly in the fading light. The scene carries the eerie calm of an approaching front line, not with the force of a sweeping army, but with the inevitability of a slow erosion. They are not designed to overwhelm instantly. They win by persistence, by exploiting abundance, and by feeding with a precision that drains the landscape one seed at a time. In the endless cycle of planting and harvest, their presence challenges human efforts to maintain control, reminding us that even in the most managed environments, ecological forces continue to push back in quiet, relentless ways. Beneath the overhang of a quiet roof, tucked into the shaded angle where warmth collects but wind rarely reaches, a structure hangs like a suspended lantern made of dry parchment. At a glance, it appears brittle, a fragile ornament shaped by time rather than by living hands. But as the camera moves closer, the surface reveals its true nature. The nest is a layered city built from fibers scraped from weathered wood, each strip chewed into pulp, softened with saliva, and molded into hexagonal chambers arranged with the precision of an architect who never hesitates. A single sheet becomes a platform, which becomes a comb, which becomes a tier, until the entire structure forms a miniature metropolis, suspended by a narrow stalk. This stalk vibrates subtly as the inhabitants move across it. The first sign that this pale grey lantern is not abandoned, but alive with purpose. Paper wasps are engineers by instinct, and every phase of their city reflects the unseen hierarchy that sustains it. At the center of the colony is the queen, a fertile female who founded the structure earlier in the season by shaping the first few cells from the simplest mixture of wood fibers and water. Her body is larger, her abdomen fuller, and her behavior more measured compared to the workers that now surround her. These workers are all daughters, sterile females, who do not simply support the queen, but form the operational backbone of the colony. They forage for wood to expand the nest, hunt insects to feed developing larvae, and guard the perimeter with a vigilance that sharpens as the colony grows. As the morning light strengthens, workers return to the nest, carrying thin curls of chewed fibers. They land on the fragile rims of the combs and begin to build, layering new pulp over old surfaces with a continuity that makes the transitions invisible. Their movements are deliberate, yet efficient. The fibers they use come from logs, fence posts, and even cardboard left exposed to the elements. When chewed, these cellulose fragments become a pliable material with remarkable insulating properties. The resulting nest is both lightweight and resilient, capable of maintaining structural strength through rainstorms and temperature shifts. Though small, this paper city is a marvel of distributed labor, each wasp executing tasks driven by chemical cues, environmental conditions, and the collective rhythm of the colony. The caste structure deepens as the season progresses. The queen, having produced her first generation of workers, now shifts almost entirely to egg-laying. Her offspring fill the combs in neat columns, each larva sealed within its cell, fed a steady diet of chewed-up insect prey. Workers hunt caterpillars, flies, and various soft-bodied invertebrates with an efficiency honed through millions of years of evolution. They use their sharp mandibles to grasp prey and their venom to immobilize it before carrying it back in manageable pieces. Each delivery is shared among developing larvae, who convert the protein into rapid growth. The larvae, in turn, secrete a sugary liquid that adult wasps consume for energy. This exchange becomes a hidden economic engine, a cyclical trade between generations that fuels both construction and defense. As the colony expands, the nest becomes a hub of coordinated flight. Wasps enter and exit in controlled arcs, rarely colliding despite their speed. Their sensory adaptations allow them to gauge air currents, detect chemical trails, and recognize nestmates by subtle cues. A foreign wasp, or curious predator approaching the nest immediately changes the colony's behavior. Workers freeze for a brief moment, antennae angled forward, bodies tensed. The pause lasts only a heartbeat before they take flight in a unified burst, a sudden swirling cloud born from instinctive recognition of danger. This is not chaotic aggression. It is an organized response where each member acts with the same underlying priority: protect the queen, the brood, and the city they have built. Stings are the most visible aspect of wasp defense, and they exist for more than simple deterrence. A single sting introduces venom that triggers pain and inflammation, but more importantly, it releases chemical signals that mark the target. These signals call other workers to join the attack, creating a feedback loop in which one sting becomes an invitation for many. The coordination is so efficient that within a moment, the colony transforms from a quiet engineering collective into a war party. Their movements become sharper, their flight patterns more erratic, their focus laser tight on the intruder. The camera captures the shift. Workers darting forward in short bursts, bodies angled downward in attack posture, wings vibrating with a frequency that warns any animal capable of interpreting sound. Predators rarely underestimate paper wasps once they have experienced such a defense. Birds learn quickly to avoid the distinctive nests, and mammals that raid for larvae must weigh the nutritional reward against the cost of multiple stings. Despite their relatively small size, paper wasps enforce territorial boundaries with an efficiency that shapes animal behavior across entire landscapes. Even humans approach these nests with caution, often leaving them undisturbed when they hang peacefully beneath eaves or tree branches. It is only when the city grows too close to human activity that conflict becomes inevitable. The wasps' social structure ensures that their cities function with remarkable stability, yet this stability is temporary by design. In late summer, new males and fertile females emerge from the brood, distinguishable from workers by subtle differences in body shape and behavior. Males do not participate in construction or defense. Their primary function is mating. Once they leave the nest, many will never return. The fertile females, future queens, embark on mating flights in which they mate with several males before seeking shelter for the winter. Their survival determines the continuation of the lineage. The old queen's influence fades as the season progresses, and the colony that once thrived with disciplined coordination begins to decline. Workers die off gradually, the nest weathers and cracks, and the once bustling paper city falls silent. Yet in the peak of summer, when the colony is at its strongest, the nest operates with an intensity that resembles an empire in full power. Workers gather around carrion to harvest meat, slicing it into portable strips that they carry back like provisions for a distant battalion. Their ability to strip flesh so efficiently surprises many observers who assume wasps feed only on nectar or fruit. But protein is essential for their larvae, and carrion becomes a valuable resource when insects are scarce. Groups of workers gather at these sites in formations that mirror their defensive swarms, their bodies aligned as if following invisible ranks. Their behavior might resemble the foraging of ants, but the aerial precision of wasps adds a dimension that feels uniquely tactical. The city's internal climate remains a crucial part of its success. Paper nests breathe, allowing moisture to escape and airflow to circulate through the combs. Workers adjust the nest's outer envelope depending on heat and humidity, a subtle method of thermoregulation that ensures larvae develop at stable temperatures. In very hot conditions, workers may fan their wings at the nest entrance, creating a cooling draft. When rain threatens, their bodies cluster along vulnerable edges to prevent water from seeping into the brood chambers. These adaptations highlight the delicate balance between fragility and resilience that defines paper wasp societies. By autumn, the once thriving city becomes a quiet relic, its builders scattered, its queen replaced by daughters hidden in logs and leaf litter. But the legacy of the colony persists in the scars on wood where fibers were scraped, the predators that learned caution, and the ecological roles fulfilled through predation and pollination. Each paper city is temporary, but its influence echoes through ecosystems long after it falls into ruin. And each spring, when new queens emerge to chew their first strips of wood pulp, the cycle begins anew. The rise of another empire built from paper, defended by war parties, and sustained by the relentless discipline of a species shaped by both cooperation and conflict. In the quiet margins of gardens, orchards, and aging forests, there are structures that seem perfectly still to the casual observer. Weathered beams beneath an old shed, hollow bamboo stakes once used in planting, and dead trunks standing like forgotten monuments. Yet when the camera pushes close and sunlight strikes the grain just right, these surfaces reveal tiny circular openings, carved so precisely that they resemble the drill marks of a human tool. They are smooth, symmetrical, and free of frayed fibers. These are the doorways of carpenter bees, entrances to wooden apartment blocks, engineered not by machine, but by muscle, mandible, and persistence. A carpenter bee does not chew wood for food. Instead, she drills into it to create shelter, carving tunnels that will cradle her offspring through development. When she begins this work, the wood vibrates with a faint rasping hum, a sound produced by the rapid movement of her mandibles as they grind into the fibers. Through close observation, the viewer can see tiny spirals of sawdust falling in steady streams from the entrance, forming pale heaps at the base of the structure. These piles signal the presence of a builder, a solitary architect shaping her home grain by grain. The tunnels extend far deeper than their small entrances suggest. A typical carpenter bee gallery may stretch the length of a human hand, following the wood grain with surprising anatomical precision. Inside, the passage widens into a straight corridor, with partitions sculpted from chewed wood pulp dividing the tunnel into sequential brood cells. Each cell becomes a nursery chamber, where the bee deposits a mixture of pollen and nectar, forming a compact loaf of provisions tailored to the needs of a growing larva. This mixture, often called bee bread, sustains the larva through every stage of development until it transforms into an adult ready to emerge. But while carpenter bees are often labeled as solitary, this description conceals the complexity of their real social behavior. Solitary does not mean isolated. When prime wooden real estate becomes scarce, when storms, decay, or urban expansion reduce the availability of natural nesting spots, carpenter bees adapt by reusing old tunnels and expanding them into interconnected systems. What begins as a single passage carved by one female can, over several seasons, evolve into an intricate network with multiple entrances, branching corridors, and stacked brood chambers. These formations resemble a compressed cityscape, a vertical neighborhood hidden within the grain of a single beam or trunk. Often several females share these structures. They do not form the strict caste system of social bees, but they may cooperate in subtle ways. One female, typically the oldest or largest, assumes the primary reproductive role, laying most of the eggs. Younger females take on support tasks such as guarding the entrance or collecting additional nectar and pollen. This loose division of labor is flexible and shifts with environmental conditions. It is a form of proto-sociality, an evolutionary midpoint between isolated nesting and fully eusocial behavior. The arrangement benefits all participants. The primary female gains assistance, while the younger ones gain the safety and stability of a shared dwelling. The entrances of these wooden apartment blocks function as both doorways and defensive checkpoints. Carpenter bees may appear gentle compared to stinging social bees, but they are formidable defenders of their nests. When a potential intruder approaches, whether a parasitic wasp seeking to lay its eggs inside the brood cells or a bird testing the chamber out of curiosity, the guard female positions herself in the entrance, buzzing with a deep, resonant tone that echoes through the wood. This sound serves as a warning, and many animals recognize it as a signal of an insect unwilling to yield. Though female carpenter bees carry a sting, they rarely deploy it. Their primary defense is intimidation, and it succeeds more often than not. Within the tunnels, the temperature remains remarkably stable. Wood acts as an insulating barrier, buffering the brood from sudden shifts in heat and cold. This natural thermoregulation is one of the keys to the carpenter bee's reproductive success. In exposed landscapes where other bee species struggle to maintain brood temperatures, carpenter bees enjoy an advantage. Even in early spring, when nights are cold and flowers scarce, the wooden chambers retain enough warmth to allow larvae to continue developing. This stability comes at a cost. The labor required to excavate and maintain tunnels is intense, but evolution has favored those willing to invest in protection through architecture. The ecological significance of carpenter bee nesting becomes clear when observing how these structures persist through seasons. Abandoned tunnels rarely remain empty for long. New females may take them over, cleaning out old debris, repairing weakened chambers, and adding new segments. In some cases, tunnels carved by one generation become multi-generational legacies, used by daughters, granddaughters, and unrelated newcomers alike. The resulting wooden cities grow in complexity year after year, with corridors that branch like the root network of a small plant. Predators and parasites shape these behaviors in ways that are not always obvious. One particularly persistent threat is the carpenter bee's parasitic enemy, the bee fly. This insect hovers near nest entrances, waiting for a brief moment when a guard is distracted. When the opportunity arises, the fly darts forward, launching an egg into the chamber with astonishing accuracy. Once inside, the larva of the fly feeds on the provisions intended for the carpenter bee's offspring. This pressure encourages carpenter bees to guard their entrances more frequently and to nest in closer proximity to one another, creating clusters where several females collectively reduce the risk of intrusion. The notion of a solitary bee shifts subtly as we observe these apartment blocks more closely. Here, cooperation arises not from strict genetic roles, but from shared necessity. Good nesting sites are limited. Wood that is soft enough to excavate yet sturdy enough to provide shelter is not abundant in many habitats, especially in areas altered by human development. This scarcity drives carpenter bees into communal living arrangements that blur the lines between independence and social engagement. They do not seek empire in the way wasps do, through coordinated aggression or hierarchical castes. Instead, they drift into empire mode quietly, through the slow accumulation of tunnels, the expansion of existing dwellings, and the repeated reuse of the same wooden foundations. From a distance, these structures appear mundane, just holes in a beam or trunk. But when viewed through the lens of ecological function and architectural ingenuity, they reveal a layered narrative. Carpenter bees are essential pollinators, visiting flowers in early spring when few other insects are active. Their robust bodies generate enough heat to fly on cool mornings, and their habit of buzz pollination, vibrating flowers to release pollen, makes them crucial for plants that require this specialized method. Their nesting behavior, while often misunderstood as destructive, contributes to the natural decay and aeration of dead wood, opening pathways for fungi, insects, and microorganisms that continue the cycle of decomposition. Throughout the year, the wooden apartment blocks serve as miniature hubs of life. As summer wanes and new adults emerge, they linger inside the tunnels, strengthening flight muscles and adjusting sensory systems before venturing into the open air. The structure that once sheltered larvae now becomes a temporary refuge for resting adults. Some will remain to overwinter within the wood, while others search for new foraging grounds. In time, the original tunnels will crack, weather, and decay. But carpenter bees continue to shape new ones, shifting their architectural empire from one wooden canvas to the next. Their cities rise not through grand construction, but through persistence, reuse, and the adaptive strategies of insects balancing independence with cooperation. In the world of bees, where social extremes range from strict hierarchies in honeybee hives to the solitude of leafcutters, carpenter bees occupy a quiet but remarkable middle ground, proof that even species considered solitary can bend toward community when the environment demands it. Beneath the loose bark of fallen tropical logs, where the air grows heavy and still, a quiet world thrives in the darkness. The ground here is layered with decomposing leaves, softened wood, and the faint musk of fungal growth. When the camera pushes below the surface, slipping between the fractured layers of a rotting trunk, the darkness begins to stir. First, there is only the sound, a soft rasping unlike the buzz or chirp of most insects. Then comes the movement, a ripple of glossy bodies shifting in coordinated waves. This is the concealed metropolis of the Madagascar hissing cockroach, a communal species whose underground realm resembles a living, breathing city hidden beneath the floorboards of the forest. The Madagascar hissing cockroach is unlike the household roach associated with human settlements. It is larger, heavier, and more deliberate in its movements. When light touches its armored plates, they reflect with the sheen of polished mahogany. The body is segmented into smooth, overlapping shields that feel ancient, as though borrowed from a lineage that has walked the earth for millions of years, which in truth they have. These cockroaches belong to an evolutionary line older than many mammalian families, surviving catastrophic extinctions, not through speed or venom, but through resilience and communal living. Their most famous trait, the hiss, defines the colony's internal communication. While many insects rely on stridulation, vibrating wings or legs to produce sound, the Madagascar hissing cockroach uses a method that is almost vertebrate in its mechanics. Air is forced through specialized spiracles along the abdomen, producing a sound that ranges from a low warning rumble to an intense, high-pitched burst. Each type of hiss carries meaning, shaping the dynamics of the colony hidden beneath the log. Males hiss during territorial challenges, inflating their thoraxes and raising their bodies in stiff postures as they confront rivals. Females hiss more quietly to ward off disturbance or signal readiness during courtship. Even juveniles contribute to the chorus, emitting softer exhalations that serve as alarm signals when the colony is startled. These sounds travel through the underground chambers like the muffled conversations of a crowded shelter. When a predator nudges the outer surface of the log, a tenrec rooting for invertebrates, or a bird probing for hidden prey, the colony responds as a single organism. Hundreds of bodies retreat deeper into the structure, their movements generating an audible rustle as legs scrape against wood fibers. The hissing begins as scattered bursts, then rises into a unified wave that warns the predator that disturbing this dark chamber may not yield safe or easy prey. The sound, amplified by the hollowed spaces of the log, becomes a defensive barrier as effective as any armor. Inside the colony, the cockroaches cluster densely, their bodies layered like tiles on a roof. The warmth they produce collectively creates a microclimate very different from the surrounding forest. Moisture condenses on the walls of the chamber as they breathe, creating a humid pocket ideal for microbial decomposition. In fact, their presence accelerates the breakdown of wood, aiding fungi and bacteria, while providing the cockroaches with softened fibers, hiding spaces, and access points deeper into the structure. The colony becomes an ecosystem engineer, subtly reshaping the forest floor while feeding on vegetable matter, fruit, shed leaves, and the occasional fallen carcass. When food appears, whether a dropped piece of fruit or a decaying seed pod, the colony comes alive in a way that resembles a street market erupting at dawn. Bodies converge from multiple tunnels, legs tapping quickly, antennae crossing in constant contact. Each individual tests the food, tasting with sensory hairs on the mouthparts before tearing off a fragment with strong mandibles. The competition looks intense, but this is not mindless frenzy. Through subtle pushes, hisses, and shuffles, the cockroaches maintain order, ensuring each member of the group feeds. Larger males hold their ground, but females and juveniles slip through gaps beneath their bodies. The massed swarm becomes a living shield over the food pile, their overlapping exoskeletons sealing out moisture loss and protecting the site from scavengers for the brief moment it remains available. In captivity, terrariums mimicking their natural habitat, this behavior becomes easier to observe. With artificial logs, bark shelters, and hidden chambers, the cockroaches form tight colonies, identical to those in the wild. When evening arrives and the lights dim, the entire terrarium stirs. Cockroaches emerge from every crevice, filling the floor like a slow-moving tide. Their bodies glide over one another, antennae probing, hisses echoing through the enclosure as males establish dominance at the prime feeding spots. Though humans often view cockroaches with aversion, there is a strange, undeniable order to these gatherings. Hierarchies form, disputes flare and resolve, and the colony functions with the social complexity of an underground city that wakes fully only when the artificial day ends. Territorial disputes between males are among the most striking behaviors. When two males encounter each other near prime space, a tunnel entrance, a food-rich corner, or a preferred mating area, they square off, raising their bodies high. Their horns, thickened extensions on the pronotum, push against each other like miniature rams. The hiss they emit during these contests is loud enough to carry through the substrate, startling nearby individuals. Yet, despite the dramatic display, The fights rarely escalate into injury. One male eventually lowers his body and retreats, recognizing the dominance of the other through the combined signals of posture and sound. These rituals ensure order while preventing unnecessary harm, a balance that keeps the colony stable. Mating occurs within this same layered community. Females give birth to live young, a rarity among insects. The eggs develop inside the female's body in a structure resembling a protective case, emerging as fully formed juveniles. These offspring remain close to their mother initially, sheltering among adults whose large bodies offer warmth and protection. This form of parental proximity, while not care in a mammalian sense, improves juvenile survival by letting them grow in the safety of numbers. When light fades in the forest, countless new juveniles disperse deeper into the log's network, expanding the colony's living quarters like children exploring unexplored streets of their native city. Predators shape this underground world as well. Spiders slip through cracks to seize wandering juveniles. Centipedes infiltrate narrow passages with venomous forcipules ready. Even some parasitic wasps seek out the colony, slipping past the defensive hiss to lay eggs inside soft-bodied nymphs. These threats influence the cockroach's behavior, encouraging them to maintain tight clusters, remain alert to vibrations, and retreat quickly when disturbances occur. The sounds they produce, the hiss, the rustle of massed movement, are tools honed through evolutionary necessity, warning predators while coordinating the response of hundreds of individuals at once. Despite their fearsome reputation, Madagascar hissing cockroaches are among the most ecologically valuable decomposers in their environment. They break down organic debris at a pace that accelerates nutrient cycling, returning minerals to the soil and opening niches for seedlings, fungi, and countless other invertebrates. Their underground cities are not simply places of refuge, they are engines of forest renewal. By the time the camera pulls back out from the darkness beneath the log, the colony settles again into its dim, humid equilibrium. The hissing fades to silence. Bodies shift only slightly as the individuals settle into crevices, conserving energy until the next disturbance or the next drop of fruit triggers another wave of communal activity. It is a society hidden from view, yet full of intricate behavior, subtle communication, and evolutionary resilience. A world that thrives in darkness, waiting patiently for the moment when the lights go out and the city awakens. At dawn in the high mountain forests of central Mexico, the air is cold enough that breath condenses in faint clouds, drifting between tall oyamel firs that rise like pillars from the mist. The forest seems still, almost suspended between night and day. But as the first rays of sunlight reach the canopy, something extraordinary happens. The branches, which only moments ago looked weighed down by dead leaves, begin to tremble, not from wind, but from life. Millions of folded wings begin to loosen, unfurling until the trees shift from muted brown to a vibrant blaze of orange. Monarch butterflies, packed together so densely that individual bodies merge into a single living tapestry, awaken with the light. A flying nation waiting for the day's signal to move. This gathering is one of nature's most impressive acts of collective survival. These butterflies have come from thousands of kilometers away, crossing prairies, farmlands, and cities to reach this precise patch of mountain forest. No single butterfly in the cluster has ever made the journey before. The migration is a generational relay, spanning multiple lifetimes, with each new generation inheriting an unspoken map encoded in their biology. They navigate using cues from the sun, the Earth's magnetic field, and the shifting patterns of air currents. Although delicate in appearance, their bodies are aerodynamic machines, built for long-distance flight on wings thinner than paper, yet reinforced with veins that provide both structure and sensory feedback. As the temperature rises slightly, the monarchs begin to lift from the branches. At first, the movement is tentative, a few individuals drifting into the air to test the conditions. Their wings beat with slow, deliberate strokes, catching the early sunlight until they glow like stained glass. Then, as if responding to an invisible signal, the entire cluster stirs. Thousands take flight simultaneously, creating a soft, rustling sound that resembles falling rain. The forest becomes a vast chamber filled with drifting orange embers, rising and swirling as the butterflies warm their flight muscles. It is a moment both chaotic and ordered, a controlled release of a population that has learned to move together without the need for leaders or commands. The monarch migration is not a single journey, but a sequence of them. The monarchs that arrive in Mexico each winter are part of what is known as the super generation, butterflies that live far longer than their parents and grandparents. While a typical monarch may live only a few weeks, the super generation can survive for several months, delaying reproduction until after the long journey south. They conserve energy by gliding on thermal currents, rising and falling through layers of warm air like orange kites guided not by strings, but by instinct. When food becomes scarce or wind patterns shift unfavorably, the butterflies rest in vast numbers, clustering on tree trunks and branches. Their massed bodies create pockets of insulation that preserve heat in cold weather, a form of collective thermoregulation essential for survival at high altitudes. The journey north begins with the arrival of spring. The supergeneration leaves the mountain forests and spreads across the landscape in slow waves, laying eggs on milkweed plants wherever they find them. Each egg becomes a caterpillar that feeds exclusively on milkweed leaves, absorbing chemical compounds that render the developing butterfly toxic to many predators. The bright orange and black wings serve as a visual warning, a universal signal across ecosystems that these insects are not worth the risk. Birds that ignore this warning learn quickly, often after a single unpleasant taste. As the first generation matures into adults, they continue the journey northward. But they do not complete the entire migration. Instead, they travel a portion of the route, reproduce, and die. Their offspring continue the next leg, followed by another generation, and another, until the butterflies reach regions that their ancestors left many months earlier. This relay ensures that the population advances steadily, even though no individual completes the entire round trip. It is an empire built on continuity, with each generation contributing a chapter to the story of a migration larger than any single life. The monarch's ability to navigate across such vast distances has long fascinated scientists. Their internal compass combines two key elements: a time-compensated sun compass and sensitivity to the Earth's magnetic field. As the butterflies travel, they adjust their orientation based on the position of the sun, using light-sensitive molecules within their antennae to interpret the changing angle of solar radiation throughout the day. When clouds obscure the sun, they switch to magnetoreception, aligning themselves with the faint geomagnetic patterns that surround the planet. These biological tools, inherited and refined through countless generations, allow the monarch nation to travel with precision across an entire continent. Throughout the journey, the monarchs face a range of predators and environmental hazards. Spiders build webs in the paths of migration corridors. Birds, despite the butterflies' toxicity, occasionally attempt to capture them. Sudden storms can bring down thousands in minutes, grounding the fragile insects before they can seek shelter. Yet the migration persists, driven not by individual strength, but by sheer numbers and the adaptive resilience of the species. Even when a generation suffers heavy losses, the survivors continue forward, seeding the next population that will revive the momentum of the migration. When the butterflies finally return to the northern breeding grounds, prairies rich in milkweed and wildflowers, the final generations of the relay expand the population dramatically. These late summer monarchs feed aggressively on nectar, storing energy that will eventually fuel the emergence of the next super generation. As daylight shortens and temperatures drop, these butterflies undergo physiological changes that delay reproduction. Their bodies begin to shift into migratory mode. Wings harden, metabolism slows, and fat reserves increase. The cycle prepares them for the long southward flight, initiating the start of another empire-scale movement toward the mountain forests they have never seen, yet somehow know. In those forests, every tree tells a story. Some branches bend under the weight of monarchs stacked wing to wing. Others host smaller clusters that pulse gently as butterflies cling in layers. When millions settle on a single tree, the combined mass can be heavy enough to sway the trunk in the wind. Each resting butterfly conserves energy, regulating temperature through wing position and body orientation. When nighttime cold settles in, they close their wings tightly, forming a dense shell of overlapping scales that traps heat. When morning sun returns, they reopen, absorbing warmth through the dark veins of their wings before taking flight once more. The spectacle is more than visual. It is ecological. The monarch migration connects distant ecosystems, linking northern grasslands with southern mountain forests in a cycle of pollination, nutrient exchange, and genetic dispersal that spans an entire continent. Their arrival in each region influences flowering cycles, predator-prey dynamics, and even plant distribution patterns. They are not merely travelers, they are agents of ecological continuity. As the camera pulls back, rising above the fur canopy, the full scale of the monarch nation comes into view. Orange clouds drift between mountains, riding the rising thermals with steady determination. The butterflies form no rigid formations, yet the movement is unmistakably directed. They follow pathways traced by generations before them, routes encoded not in memory but in biology, guiding them across borders, landscapes, and seasons. This is not a swarm. It is a nation in motion, an aerial empire whose citizens weigh less than a gram, yet cross the continent with precision that challenges even the most sophisticated human instruments. Their migration is a map drawn in wings, a legacy carried through time, and one of the most extraordinary displays of collective movement in the natural world. As daylight drains from the rainforest, the last shafts of sun catch on the towering trunks and buttress roots, painting the understory in ribbons of fading gold. The temperature drops slightly, carrying the scent of fermenting fruit and damp soil through the thick foliage. A moment earlier, the air was filled with the quick, darting movements of daytime butterflies. The small Pierids skimming low to the ground, the metal marks flickering like sparks. But now the forest enters a transitional hour, that narrow band between day and night when colors shift toward blue and shadows lengthen into unbroken pools. It is here, along the edges of trails and clearings, that a new presence begins to emerge. Not with haste, but with the slow confidence of a creature evolved to own this dim corridor of time. The owl butterfly rises from the forest floor with a wingspan broad enough to cast a moving shadow. Its wings, when folded, resemble the bark of a decrepit trunk, mottled brown, weathered, and irregular. But when they open, the illusion falls away. The hind wings reveal enormous eye spots, each painted with concentric rings of cream, yellow, and obsidian. In low light, these eyes appear almost luminescent, catching the last remnants of the sun as though drawing power from the retreating day. A single butterfly is striking enough. A cluster of them, gliding in wide, deliberate arcs along a trail at dusk, feels like the twilight patrol of a silent, watchful guild. The owl butterfly belongs to a lineage adapted for life at the margins of light. While many butterflies rely on sunlight to fuel rapid wing beats, the owl butterfly's strategy is different. Its wings are disproportionately large relative to its body, allowing broad, buoyant glides that require minimal energy. This design suits the dim hours when predators rely on motion more than detail to detect prey. The butterfly's slow flight becomes a form of camouflage, too large to be a typical insect target, too shadow-like to be easily distinguished against the forest backdrop. In fact, their size is often mistaken by predators for something far more formidable, a small bird or mammal, not an insect. As the camera follows one individual drifting along the tree line, the scene widens to reveal several others. Dozens of these butterflies navigate the edge of the forest in loose formation, their flight paths overlapping without collision. There is no coordinated choreography among them, yet their shared behavior gives the impression of a patrol moving with quiet authority. They glide from sap flow to sap flow, from overripe fruit to fermenting clusters of fallen figs. At these sites, they gather in groups, wings angled downward as they feed with extended proboscises, siphoning the sugary liquids that fermenting substrates provide. These hotspots become beacons in the dimness, attracting multiple species of butterflies and moths, but the owl butterflies dominate simply by presence. Their feeding behavior reveals an ecological niche few other butterflies can fill. Fermenting fruit provides not only sugars, but also trace amounts of alcohol produced by natural yeasts. Owl butterflies, like many fruit-feeding species, tolerate these compounds well, gaining energy from resources that would be inaccessible to nectar specialists. The forest floor becomes their dining hall, a place where their heavy bodies and slower flight patterns face fewer obstacles than in the high canopy. Here they can feast for extended periods, probing crevices in rotting fruit to reach the deepest reservoirs of fermenting liquid. But feeding attracts more than butterflies. Small mammals, beetles, and ants also converge on these sites, creating a temporary hub of interaction. Owl butterflies maintain their ground by deploying one of their most effective defenses, their eye spots. When disturbed, they open their wings abruptly, flashing the false eyes toward the intruder. In bright conditions, the effectiveness is limited. At dusk, however, when shapes are ambiguous and shadows elongate into uncertainty, the eye spot display becomes dramatically more potent. Predators relying on low-light vision interpret these patterns as the gaze of a much larger animal. Birds hesitate. Rodents halt mid-approach. Even predatory insects pause long enough for the butterfly to slip away. The strategy reflects a deeper evolutionary truth. Intimidation works best when light is scarce and detail is compromised. The owl butterfly has mastered this window. Its entire sensory and behavioral repertoire is tuned to twilight. Its eyes contain adaptations that enhance contrast in low illumination, allowing it to navigate forest edges where light filters unevenly through foliage. Its flight muscles warm more quickly than those of typical diurnal butterflies, enabling earlier takeoff in the evening. And its larvae feed on robust grasses and banana plants, allowing the species to thrive in a range of habitats along forest margins, plantations, and natural clearings where dusk activity encounters fewer obstructions. As evening deepens, the forest nocturnal agents begin to emerge. Frogs calling from hidden hollows, katydids tuning their wings for the night's chorus, and geckos stalking the trunks with patience born of experience. Owl butterflies navigate through this shifting web of predators with surprising success. Their broad wings provide lift in still air, reducing their need for rapid flapping that might attract attention. Their slow, deliberate flight masks their exact position, making it difficult for bats to echolocate them with precision. While bats can detect small insects with ease, the owl butterfly's large surface area and irregular wing beat patterns reflect sound in ways that reduce detection efficiency. It is not perfect protection, but in the half-light, it often proves enough. The concentration of owl butterflies around sap flows creates temporary communities where dozens gather, their wings overlapping slightly as they feed. The scene resembles a night market along the forest floor, bustling, purposeful, transient. Here, subtle interactions emerge that reveal the social dynamics of these usually solitary insects. Larger individuals occasionally displace smaller ones through slow, deliberate pushes. Juveniles testing newly earned flight capabilities flutter at the edges, finding openings in the feeding cluster. Males hover nearby, drawn by scent cues emitted from female wing glands. These interactions form a loose social fabric, not cooperative in the classical sense, yet collectively shaping the butterfly's survival at twilight. Predators still probe this gathering. A small opossum noses toward a fruit cluster, only to be met by a sudden eruption of wings and eye spots. The burst of movement startles it momentarily, granting the butterflies precious seconds to reposition. In another corner, an ant column tries to overrun a fruit mass, but the butterfly's sheer size disrupts their advance, scattering the ants long enough for the butterflies to feed without harassment. The forest at dusk becomes a stage of constant negotiation, each species leveraging its advantages while minimizing risk. Eventually, the light fades to the point where even the owl butterflies must retreat. They settle on tree trunks, blending into the bark pattern with closed wings. Their eye spots disappear, hidden safely beneath the camouflaged forewings. Their bodies grow still, conserving energy for the next evening's patrols. Around them, the forest shifts into true night, filled with sounds that the butterflies are not equipped to face. Twilight is their kingdom, a narrow but vital span between day and night when their adaptations place them at the center of the forest's transitions. As the camera drifts upward through the canopy, the last lingering individuals glide silently between trees, leaving behind only the faintest rustle of wings. These butterflies may not cross continents or form massive overwintering colonies, but they represent a different kind of Lepidopteran empire, one defined not by distance but by mastery of time. While others retreat with the sun, the owl butterfly rises, claiming the forest edges in loose, shifting gangs that navigate by shadow, intimidation, and quiet precision. They are the night shift of the butterfly realm, patrolling the threshold between daylight and darkness, feeding on what the forest offers only at its dimmest hour, and asserting their presence through size, softness, and the uncanny illusion of eyes that watch the dusk, as if possessing a mind far older than their wings. The surface of a still pond looks deceptively calm at first glance. A smooth sheet of reflected sky, broken only by drifting leaves and the stems of emergent plants. Yet, as the camera lowers toward the waterline, the illusion of stillness fractures. Shadows flicker across the surface, not from fish or wind, but from insects so light that their feet barely dimple the water. Water striders, members of the family Geridae, patrol the boundary between air and water with effortless grace. Their bodies glide across the meniscus as if skimming an invisible membrane, propelled by movements so precise that ripples whisper outward in near-perfect circles. They are the surface navy of freshwater ecosystems, forming loose flotillas that respond not only to prey movements, but to wind shifts, current changes, and subtle social spacing rules that keep their tiny empire from collapsing into chaos. The physical world these insects inhabit is unlike any other. Most animals treat the water's surface as a barrier, something to break through or remain beneath. But water striders treat it as a navigable plain. Their bodies are covered in thousands of microscopic hairs, coated in a waxy substance that traps air, making them nearly impossible to wet. Each leg presses downward against the surface with a weight distributed through hydrophobic bristles, generating enough surface tension to keep the insect suspended like a small vessel supported by a taut canvas. The long mid-legs act as paddles, stroking against the surface with speed and precision, while the hind legs provide steering and stabilization. The front legs remain poised as weapons, always ready to seize prey. At midday, when sunlight warms the pond and the water becomes an active stage of insect flight, the striders gather in groups across the widest, calmest stretches. They do not cluster haphazardly. Across the pond, one can see small flotillas spaced evenly apart, each a loose constellation of individuals maintaining a delicate balance between cooperation and competition. If one strider approaches too closely, its neighbor snaps forward in a short burst of speed, sending tiny waves radiating outward. These waves carry information. Water striders are exceptional at detecting vibrations on the surface. Their legs feel the bending of the meniscus as clearly as other animals detect sound or scent. A single pulse can announce the arrival of prey, a change in wind, or the presence of an intruder. In the heart of each flotilla, the spacing becomes more rigid. Central territory is valuable because it offers stability. Fewer waves, less disturbance, and greater predictability when hunting. The individuals that hold these positions tend to be larger or more experienced. They react less dramatically to minor disturbances, conserving energy and intercepting prey before it reaches the edge of the formation. Around this core, the front-line hunters patrol the periphery. These individuals respond rapidly to ripples that signal struggling insects, a trapped ant, a fallen fly, or the frantic kicks of a mosquito larva nearing the surface. Frontliners accelerate instantly, skating across the water with startling speed, sometimes even leaping short distances by slamming their legs against the surface. Their job is to intercept prey before it escapes underwater or drifts to another flotilla's territory. The hunting process is a combination of sensory acuity and brutal efficiency. The water strider detects the specific vibration pattern emitted by a struggling insect, the erratic, sharp ripples of panic, and follows it like a beacon. When it reaches the prey, it grasps it with the hooked front legs and injects digestive enzymes that liquefy the internal tissues. Feeding is quick, reducing the chance that fish or other predators will challenge the kill. The carcass, once emptied, is released back into the water, where it sinks or becomes food for bottom-dwelling scavengers. This relentless predation helps regulate the insect populations that would otherwise accumulate on the water's surface, balancing the micro-ecosystem with each swift interception. Wind introduces a new layer of complexity. On breezy afternoons, the flotillas begin to shift, adjusting their positions like a fleet responding to changing currents. A gust from the west pushes floating debris and drifting insects toward the eastern shore, and the water striders redistribute accordingly. They do this without a leader or signal beyond the physics of the water itself. As the wind increases, the frontline hunters move slightly ahead of the rest, taking advantage of incoming prey. Meanwhile, individuals in the central territory remain anchored in place, using subtle strokes of the hind legs to maintain spacing. If the wind becomes too strong and generates surface turbulence, the flotillas retreat into sheltered coves or areas partially blocked by vegetation. These retreats resemble naval fleets seeking harbor before a storm, measured, deliberate, and informed by an understanding of their element. In streams, the story changes. The water striders here form elongated formations positioned upstream, oriented like a convoy cutting against current. Those at the front face the strongest push and take on the role of scouts and interceptors. Individuals behind benefit from reduced water resistance and can respond quickly when prey is freed from submerged vegetation. The entire group moves as a coordinated body when conditions shift, sometimes migrating upstream by exploiting eddies and slower-flowing channels. This upstream climb is not frantic but steady, a gradual reclaiming of territory constantly reshaped by the river's motion. Predators pose constant challenges. Fish lurk beneath the flotillas, waiting for careless individuals to dip too close. But water striders rarely fall prey easily. Their ability to sense changes in surface tension gives them milliseconds of warning before a fish strikes. In those moments, they catapult themselves horizontally, breaking from the water's surface tension with a burst of power and landing several body lengths away. Birds also target them, particularly juveniles perched near vegetation. Yet the water striders' low profile and unpredictable movements often frustrate these attempts. Even dragonflies, aerial hunters capable of stunning precision, struggle to catch striders as they zigzag across the liquid plain. Their interactions extend beyond hunting and evasion. Mating introduces dramatic shifts in behavior and flotilla structure. Males pursue females by following the faint chemical signature she leaves on the surface, sometimes creating chase sequences that send ripples across the entire group. Larger males often dominate central positions, where their proximity to stable feeding zones gives them greater access to potential mates. Smaller males, pushed to the margins, attempt to intercept females passing through the front lines. These interactions may disrupt the flotilla briefly, but once competition resolves, the spacing reasserts itself almost immediately. Stability and efficiency return, as though the group instinctively understands the importance of restoring balance. In certain seasons, the flotillas become even denser. Newly emerged juveniles skate among adults, learning to interpret the water's signals with increasing precision. Their smaller bodies make them more susceptible to predation, so they often remain near vegetated areas where ripples are more complex and predators approach at a disadvantage. Here, the flotilla behaves differently, less like a fleet and more like a training ground, with juveniles mimicking the movements of larger individuals, following their changes in direction and learning how to detect the subtle cues that define survival on the water's surface. At dusk, the activity slows. Striders drift toward shaded banks or climb onto floating plant material to rest. But the flotillas never fully dissolve. Even in low light, the spacing persists, as though the surface navy refuses to relinquish its patrol lines. In this way, the water striders maintain a continuous presence that shapes the pond's ecological rhythms. Their hunting keeps insect populations in check. Their spacing prevents overcrowding. Their movements influence how prey species distribute themselves across the water's surface. As the camera rises, the flotillas shrink into scattered dots across the pond, each still maintaining invisible boundaries, each still responding to the subtle physics of wind and water. No central command guides them, yet the result resembles a fleet operating with tactical awareness. Front lines scarred by the impacts of prey and predators, central territories guarded by seasoned striders, and the entire surface alive with tiny ships sailing an unbroken membrane. This is a navy without sails, without flags, without leaders. A community bound by physics and instinct, navigating a world defined by tension, ripple, and light. And in the quiet interplay between motion and stillness, the surface navy of Gerridae continues its patrol, shaping the freshwater world one ripple at a time. In the late afternoon heat, when the air above the rice paddies shimmers like a thin veil of glass, flashes of deep crimson begin to slice across the sky. They appear first as streaks of red catching the sun, then resolve into unmistakable shapes. Scarlet dragonflies, wings vibrating at a frequency so fast they blur into transparent halos. They hover, pivot, drift a few centimeters to the left or right, then hold perfectly still again, suspended in place like airborne sentinels. All around the wetland edges, dozens of them take their positions, spaced evenly across the paddies and irrigation channels. This is not random flight. It is the quiet assembling of a patrol squadron, a living net woven through the air to intercept whatever smaller life dares rise from the water below. Dragonflies are among the oldest aerial hunters on Earth. Their ancestors, prehistoric giants with wingspans wider than a human handspan, once patrolled swamps long before reptiles or birds took to the sky. Modern scarlet dragonflies, smaller yet no less formidable, preserve the hunting strategies refined over millions of years. Their bodies are built for precision, elongated abdomens that stabilize flight, multifaceted eyes that detect movement in nearly every direction, and 4 independent wings capable of rapid changes in angle and stroke. This architecture allows them to hover like hummingbirds, dart like guided arrows, or reverse direction instantly in mid-air. Each maneuver is controlled by powerful thoracic muscles that contract multiple times per wing beat, giving dragonflies unmatched agility among insects. As the camera rises above the rice paddies, the scale of the formation becomes clear. Every dragonfly occupies a small territory, a sphere of air roughly the width of a human arm span, that it defends from rivals. These territories overlap slightly, forming a loosely interlocked grid. In the humid stillness of the wetland, this grid becomes a hunting net spanning the entire water surface. When swarms of mosquitoes rise from the paddies, drawn by the rich organic matter and stagnant pools, the dragonflies intercept them with a coordinated efficiency that seems almost military. One mosquito veers left to avoid a hunter. Another sweeps in from behind, trapping it in the crossfire. Few escape. To understand how this system works, one must examine the dragonfly eye, a biological supercomputer with nearly complete panoramic vision. Each compound eye contains many thousands of ommatidia, tiny lenses that feed a continuous stream of visual information to the brain. Dragonflies track prey using predictive algorithms hardwired into their nervous systems. Rather than chasing prey blindly, they calculate interception angles in real time, adjusting their flight path to meet the target's future position. This allows them to capture airborne insects with remarkable accuracy. Studies have shown that dragonflies succeed in a majority of their attempts, an unparalleled feat among aerial predators. On the ground, the rice paddy hums with life. Midges rise in swirling columns. Mosquitoes drift like slow-moving dust. Small flies hover just above the surface. Each of these insects becomes potential prey for the scarlet hunters. When densities spike, the squadron becomes even more dynamic. Individuals reduce spacing between territories, tightening the net and increasing interception rates. The air becomes a lattice of invisible flight paths, with each dragonfly adjusting position in subtle, efficient motions that maintain the integrity of the formation. No leader directs these movements. Instead, the network forms organically, shaped by instinct, visual cues, and the sheer abundance of prey. Unlike social insects with formal hierarchy, dragonflies operate individually, yet the effect of their combined presence resembles coordinated teamwork. When one dragonfly pursues prey beyond the borders of its territory, others shift inward to fill the gap. The result is seamless coverage of the airspace over the wetland. In many rice-growing regions, this natural predation plays a vital ecological role. By removing vast numbers of mosquitoes and other crop pests, dragonflies reduce the spread of disease and shield young rice plants from herbivorous insects. Local farmers may not speak of dragonfly patrol squadrons in scientific terms, but they recognize their value. Where scarlet dragonflies gather, mosquito populations thin, and evening air becomes more tolerable. Territory disputes within the squadron add another layer of complexity. Scarlet dragonflies are vivid for a reason. Their coloration intensifies in sunlight, signaling dominance to rivals. When two males challenge each other for control of a prime hunting position, they rise rapidly in spiraling duels. Their wings clatter softly as they clash, not violently enough to cause injury, but enough to test endurance and reflexes. The weaker male eventually breaks formation and retreats to the edges of the wetland, where prey density is lower. The victor returns to his previous hover, resuming the stillness that marks a territory secured. Females move differently through this sky full of hunters. They enter the formation with more caution, navigating around territorial males while searching for oviposition sites. Rice paddies provide ideal habitat, shallow water, abundant vegetation, and open sunlight. A female may hover above a suitable patch of water, dip her abdomen repeatedly to deposit eggs, and quickly retreat before drawing unwanted attention. Males may attempt to intercept her for mating, but she chooses partners selectively, often rejecting overly aggressive pursuits by dropping vertically into the water to escape. Dragonflies emerge again easily from such dives, water repelling off their bodies due to the hydrophobic microstructures on their wings and exoskeleton. Below the water surface, a different squadron prepares for its future role. Young dragonflies, nymphs, live as underwater predators, feeding on mosquito larvae, small crustaceans, and even tiny fish. They breathe through internal gills and move with short, rapid bursts powered by jets of water expelled from their rectal chambers. These nymphs are as formidable underwater as adults are in the air, forming a hidden army that polices the wetland from below. When the time comes, they crawl up plant stems, shed their exoskeletons, and emerge as winged hunters ready to claim airspace. Each new adult strengthens the aerial patrol, reinforcing the pattern that repeats across seasons. Wind introduces new tactical challenges. When breezes sweep across the paddies, the dragonflies alter their alignments like pilots adjusting to crosswinds. They angle their bodies, fold slightly into the gust, and use the turbulence to their advantage. Strong winds push insects toward leeward edges, and dragonflies focus their patrols in those zones, exploiting the concentration of prey. When the wind settles, the formation spreads again, filling the pond's airspace with a patterned distribution of red glints. The entire squadron behaves as if reading invisible signals carried through the air, responding with the speed of instinct and centuries of evolutionary refinement. As evening approaches, the wetland's colors shift. The sky deepens into warm tones of amber and violet, mirrored on the water's surface. Most insects retreat into vegetation or descend toward the mud, but the scarlet dragonflies remain active until light fades almost completely. Their silhouettes flicker against the dimming sky like sparks carried by wind. Their activity slows, but never fully stops. Even low light cannot fully hinder predators with such keen vision and stable hover. They are the last aerial hunters to leave the sky, relinquishing their patrol only when darkness finally claims the airspace. The camera pulls back, rising above the paddies, until the dragonflies appear as small red points hovering in perfect stillness. The network of territories becomes visible as a geometric spread, each hunter occupying a node in a vast natural grid. Together they form an aerial defense system, precise, silent, and relentless. The wetland below depends on them more than it appears. Every captured mosquito, every intercepted midge, every duel for airspace contributes to the balance of a habitat that thrives under their patrol. In the quiet interplay between sunlight, wind, water, and wings, the Scarlet Dragonfly Squadron stands as one of nature's most efficient skyborne forces. Fighter pilots patrolling the wetlands, locking down the air and shaping the rhythm of life over every pond and paddy they guard. Deep in the humid heart of the rainforest, where the air clings to the skin like warm mist and the canopy filters sunlight into shifting green mosaics, the forest floor begins to move. At first it is barely noticeable. A faint rustle beneath fallen leaves, a tremor of soil near the roots of a towering tree. But as the camera descends toward the ground, the movement sharpens. A procession of ants, each carrying a fragment of leaf many times larger than its own body, marches along a well-worn trail. Hundreds become thousands, thousands become millions. These are leafcutter ants, the architects of one of the most complex societies on Earth, an underground superpower whose empire stretches beneath the soil in vast, unseen cities. Leafcutter ants are famous for their harvesting lines, With jaws capable of slicing through plant tissue like living scissors, they climb stems and branches, cutting crescent-shaped leaf fragments with astonishing precision. Each worker selects a section, executes a near-perfect cut, and carries the piece over its head like a green sail. As they descend, their bodies sway slightly to balance the load, yet they never drop the leaf. The trail below hums with ceaseless motion as carriers merge into columns that flow like highways of green. But the leaves are not for eating. They are raw material, agricultural cargo destined for underground farms cultivated by the ants with the dedication and knowledge of an ancient civilization. The true heart of the colony lies beneath the surface. A mature leafcutter ant nest spans an area large enough to rival the footprint of a human neighborhood. Chambers branch from chambers in elaborate networks, each one carved with purpose. Some act as nurseries, where larvae grow in carefully controlled conditions. Others serve as storage hubs for food, or as trash pits, where waste is discarded to prevent disease. The most important chambers, however, hold the fungus gardens, living fields cultivated by the ants with the precision of expert farmers. Leafcutter ants do not eat leaves. Instead, they feed the leaves to a specialized fungus that has evolved to live only within their nests. The ants chop leaf fragments into smaller pieces, chew them into a soft pulp, and carefully spread the mixture across existing fungal mats. Workers then clean the gardens, prune unwanted growth, and even fertilize the fungus with droplets of nutrient-rich secretions. The entire system functions as an agricultural engine powered by cooperation and meticulous care. Every ant understands its role, whether tending the fungus, guarding the colony, or transporting cargo along the surface highways. The scale of these operations defies intuition. A single mature colony may house several million workers divided into castes based on size and task. The smallest workers, called minims, tend the brood and maintain the fungal gardens. Medium-sized workers forage, cut leaves, and carry the harvest back home. The largest workers, the soldiers, defend the colony with powerful jaws capable of slicing through predators or threats. This caste specialization gives the colony efficiency unmatched by many other insect societies. If one observes the trails long enough, the caste system becomes visible. Small ants riding atop the leaves carried by larger workers, grooming the plant material to remove parasites that would otherwise spread disease within the fungus chambers. Fungus is not the colony's only crop. Leafcutter ants also cultivate microbial allies. Among the most important is a strain of bacteria living on the bodies of the worker ants. This bacterium produces antibiotics that suppress parasites capable of invading the fungal gardens. The ants apply this microbial shield with careful grooming motions, coating the gardens and themselves in protective layers. This symbiosis, ants farming fungus while simultaneously farming the microbes that protect that fungus, represents a triad of life forms evolving in deep interdependence. It is agriculture millions of years older than human farming, perfected through natural selection rather than conscious design. The engineering skills of leafcutter ants extend well beyond their subterranean farms. Their nests are masterpieces of environmental control. Tunnels curve upward and downward in ways that channel airflow, moderating temperature and humidity. Certain chambers act as ventilation shafts, drawing in fresh air while expelling carbon dioxide generated by millions of bodies and the respiration of the fungus itself. Workers constantly maintain these structures, widening passages, removing debris, and adjusting the shape of chambers to optimize airflow. In essence, the colony becomes a living lung, its architecture shifting with the needs of its inhabitants. Above ground, the ants' impact on the ecosystem is profound. They are major recyclers of plant material, removing a significant portion of the leaf biomass in many tropical forests. This activity might seem destructive, but the ants actually enhance forest health by pruning plants, stimulating new growth, and accelerating nutrient cycling. The process begins the moment a leaf fragment is cut. Once brought underground, the leaf is partially decomposed by the fungus, releasing nutrients that seep into the soil. The ants' constant excavation and tunnel expansion aerate the ground, improving soil structure and permeability. Rainwater infiltrates more easily, roots penetrate deeper, and microorganisms thrive in the enriched substrate. Over time, a leafcutter ant nest becomes a hotspot of fertility, shaping the forest around it in subtle yet powerful ways. The ants' surface highways act as arteries connecting forage sites to the nest. These paths are worn smooth by countless feet and maintained deliberately by workers who remove obstacles and mark the routes with chemical signals. When a tree becomes especially productive, the colony deploys extra workers to harvest it rapidly. Trails branch and merge like a map of interconnected roads, each one alive with motion. At the edges of the forest, these highways can stretch impressive distances. A single foraging line may extend far beyond the visible nest, reaching out to valuable plants even when the nearest vegetation has been exhausted. Yet for all their order, leafcutter ant societies face constant threats. Armadillos, anteaters, parasitic flies, and invading ant species pose dangers that require rapid defensive responses. Soldiers guard the nest entrances, mandibles poised. When a predator breaches the outer tunnels, the colony shifts instantly into emergency mode. Workers retreat from the outer chambers, soldiers assemble into thick defensive lines, and the queen, buried deep within the safest chambers, becomes the focal point of protection. Without her, the colony collapses. With her, it endures, regrows, and expands. The queen herself is monumental by ant standards. She is long-lived, sometimes surviving for several decades. Her sole purpose is to lay eggs, each one contributing to the exponential growth of the colony. Surrounding workers tend to her with unwavering care, feeding her, cleaning her, and removing waste. Her presence anchors the entire system, providing stability to a population that might otherwise fracture under the sheer scale of its own operations. As night settles over the rainforest, the surface activity diminishes, but the underground superpower remains awake. The fungus continues to grow, larvae twist within their brood chambers, and workers tend their agricultural empire in shifts that never cease. The nest pulses with life, its tunnels resonating with the quiet vibrations of millions of coordinated motions. This is not simply a colony, it is a civilization, one that engineers soil, farms crops, cultivates microbes, builds ventilation systems, and governs itself without centralized control. A city of unimaginable complexity, hidden beneath a layer of earth so thin a human boot could easily pass over it without noticing. As the camera pulls back, the leafcutter ant empire blends again into the forest floor, unnoticed yet essential. It is one of the largest and most sophisticated societies on Earth, a superorganism whose scale rivals human cities, yet whose existence remains mostly invisible. In the shadowed soil below our feet lies an ancient, enduring civilization, one that proves that intelligence can take many forms, and that some of the greatest engineering feats on this planet are achieved not by human hands, but by colonies of tiny, relentless, and remarkably organized insects.